Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the world was on the brink of destruction? Let's set the scene by delving into the chilling beginnings of the Cold War, a time when two superpowers stood toe-to-toe, their ideologies as different as night and day. Right after the smoke of World War II cleared, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged, not as allies, but as potential adversaries. Democracy and capitalism on one side, communism on the other. The ideological chasm between these two nations was as deep and wide as the Atlantic Ocean that separated them. America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, bolstered by a booming economy and a vibrant capitalist society. The beacon of democracy was shining brightly, fueled by the belief that liberty and free market enterprise were the keys to prosperity and peace. On the other side of the globe, the Soviet Union, a titan in its own right, held a firm grip on its satellite states with an iron fist of communism. Their belief, that state control, not individual freedom, was the path to equality and stability. These contrasting beliefs set the stage for a tense standoff. A standoff not fought with bullets and bombs, but with propaganda, espionage, and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Both nations flexed their muscles, showcasing their military might and economic power. The United States, with its robust industrial sector and innovative technology, was a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union, with its vast resources and disciplined workforce, was no less formidable. In this era of uncertainty, both superpowers were like two heavyweight boxers in the ring, each waiting for the other to make the first move. And in this standoff, there were no punches pulled. Each side was ready and willing to go to unimaginable lengths to protect their way of life. So, the stage was set for a clash of ideologies and superpowers. The Cold War had begun, and the world watched with bated breath. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a long, silent battle that would shape the world for decades to come. Imagine waking up every day under the shadow of total annihilation. That was the reality of the Cold War. The era was marked by a nuclear arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union, both pursuing global dominance. This deadly contest brought about mutually assured destruction, MAD, the doctrine that a nuclear attack from one would result in mutual destruction. This grim principle seeped into daily life, causing fear and anxiety among the population. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was a significant event, where the Soviet Union, in a daring move, placed nuclear weapons in Cuba, close to the US. For 13 tense days, the world was on the verge of nuclear warfare, until diplomacy finally resolved the situation. This crisis highlighted the hazardous nature of the nuclear arms race and its influence on public fear. In the throes of this nuclear standoff, one could say that the Cold War was more of a chilled war, don't you think? Did you know the Cold War was not just about nuclear weapons, but also about dollars and cents? Indeed, the economic facet of this frosty confrontation was as crucial, if not more so, than the military aspect. Let's take a journey back in time to this era of intense rivalry, where two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, not only flexed their military muscles, but also their economic prowess. The economic models of these two nations were as different as night and day. On one side of the spectrum, we had the United States, a beacon of capitalism, where the free market was king. Its economy thrived on competition, innovation, and private ownership. Businesses large and small were the driving forces, with government playing a supportive role and consumer demand shaping the market. On the other side, the Soviet Union stood as a stalwart of communism, with a centrally planned economy. The government dictated the production and distribution of goods, with a focus on heavy industry. Consumer goods were often an afterthought, leading to shortages and a lower standard of living for many. Interestingly, this economic war was one of endurance. While the Soviet Union initially managed to achieve impressive industrial growth, it soon started to falter. The rigid economic system struggled to adapt to changes, innovation was stifled, and inefficiencies were rampant. Meanwhile, the United States, with its dynamic capitalist economy, demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability. It was able to weather economic downturns, bounce back, and continue to innovate. The country's economic strength bolstered its military might, allowing it to maintain a steady pressure on the Soviet Union. Amusingly, it was almost as if the two superpowers were in a marathon where the Soviet Union sprinted right out of the gate, only to run out of steam halfway, while the United States paced itself, kept a steady stride, and eventually overtook its rival. In the end, it was not just the military might, but also economic strength that determined the victor. The economic war was a test of endurance, adaptability, and resilience. And in this test, it was the United States that stood the test of time, proving that sometimes slow and steady does indeed win the race. The Cold War had its fair share of oddities, wouldn't you agree? This period of geopolitical tension between the Soviet Union and the United States is riddled with quirks that make us scratch our heads today. Let's dive into two of the most fascinating. First up, the space race. Now you might be thinking, what's so strange about a race to space? Well, imagine this. It's the mid-20th century, and while most of the world is just getting to grips with television, two superpowers are vying for celestial dominance. They're not battling it out on the battlefield, but instead they're launching satellites, sending animals and eventually humans into the great unknown. It was a competition of technological prowess, a cosmic game of chess where the board was the vast expanse of space itself. The United States and the Soviet Union were not only trying to outdo each other, they were also trying to prove the superiority of their respective political systems through their space programs. It was an extraordinary display of one-upmanship that, in the end, pushed the boundaries of human achievement. Next on our list is the curious fact that despite being termed a war, there was no direct military confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, the Cold War was fought through proxies, espionage, propaganda, and diplomatic standoffs. It was a war of ideology, fear, and a nuclear arms race that threatened global annihilation. But despite the high stakes, the two superpowers never directly engaged in combat. It was as if two heavyweight boxers spent decades circling the ring, throwing punches in the air but never actually landing a blow on each other. So, there you have it. From a race to the stars to a war without battlefield, the Cold War was anything but conventional. It was a period of paradoxes and peculiarities, an era marked by strange events and even stranger strategies. Indeed, the Cold War was a time of paradoxes and peculiarities. All's well that ends well, right? But did the Cold War really end well? In 1989, the symbol of the Cold War's division, the Berlin Wall, crumbled. A wave of change swept across Eastern Europe, leading to the peaceful overthrow of communist regimes. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, economic troubles, political unrest, and the desire for independence in Soviet republics weakened the central power. By 1991, the Soviet Union had dissolved, marking the official end of the Cold War. America emerged as the victor, but not by default. Its economic system, political stability, and military power played critical roles. The American economy thrived while the Soviet Union's centralized economy struggled. Political stability in the US contrasted with the political unrest that plagued the Soviet Union. Lastly, America's military might, particularly its nuclear arsenal, was a significant deterrent. But the end of the Cold War didn't mean the end of global tension. The rivalry between these two superpowers left deep imprints on the world. The arms race had led to widespread nuclear proliferation, and the world became a more dangerous place. Many countries, once pawns in the geopolitical chess game, were left dealing with economic and political instability. Moreover, the end of the Cold War brought about a new world order. The United States, as the sole superpower, had to navigate a world where old alliances shifted and new challenges arose. The economic, political, and military strategies that were effective during the Cold War needed to be reevaluated and adjusted to suit this new world order. Here's a funny thought. Imagine if the Cold War had been a literal Cold War, where the US and the Soviet Union threw snowballs at each other instead of threats. We'd probably have a lot less nuclear weapons and a lot more snowmen. So the Cold War might have ended, but its echoes can still be heard in the corridors of power today.